Welcome to this River Publishers book discussion. I'm Philippa Jefferies, and I have with me Remi Charron to talk about his forthcoming book, Plan for a Turbulent Future, Your Roadmap to Personal Resilience for a Changing Climate. Remi, thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem, it's my pleasure.
Could you please perhaps start by talking a little bit about how this book came about?
Well, thanks, Philippa. Yeah, it's a bit of a long journey. Over 15 years ago, I was finishing my PhD on net zero housing. And I was coming to the realization that energy efficiency and solar energy alone weren't going to be enough when we're dealing with climate change, that we have to start thinking about resilience. And at that same time, I had kids, so I had started putting together a book on resilience at that time. But then with the kids, the focus shifted to family and stuff. So I was still researching about resilience, but I was focusing more on how to make myself and my family more resilient. Essentially put together a personal resilience plan for myself and my family. Then we put that plan in motion, which essentially, I quit my job. We moved across the country to a family farm, just so that to get our kids more, more resilient by being raised on a farm. And then I guess fast forward over 10 years with COVID, found myself like everybody else at home doing some homeschooling. And I essentially challenged my 12-year-old daughter at the time to finish a short novel, because she likes to write, but she's never finished some of these novels or short novels she was working on. So I challenged her to finish one, but I said I would write a book at the same time. So she accepted. So then I had to think of a topic. So this personal resilience plan that I came up with, and set it in motion. I decided to write a book on that. Just to encourage other people to start thinking about resilience and what they can do to help better prepare themselves and their family for climate change, essentially.
So this book is kind of based around the research you did for your PhD and your own personal experiences and your family's.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, trying to put that plan together for others. Yeah.
Okay, great. Can you please expand upon what you kind of mean by resiliency in this context?
Right, there's lots of different levels of resilience. So a lot of the work I do is on housing resilience. There's business resilience. There's all sorts. But in terms of the context of personal resilience, I'm talking about actions that people can take that will either help them better manage when they face challenges posed by climate change, so that they can get through these challenges, or even avoid some challenges that climate change will bring. So for example, if you own a house and live in a community where you will be impacted by sea level rise, you can prepare in a couple of different ways. One, you could prepare your house to be able to withstand some repeated flooding and maybe save some money in case you are forced to relocate. Or you can decide, well, you'll sell your house now while the market still doesn't value the climate change and sea level rise, so that you can take your money out and move to a community where you won't be faced with sea level rise. So either way, you're preparing yourself for these challenges, which you'll be better prepared than someone that simply just ignores the fact that that climate change is happening and that sea level rise will impact millions of homes around the world.
Yeah, and this really impacts everyone, right, in every country. For example, in the UK, we've had record high temperatures over the summer, and people have very much struggled to deal with that. So this isn't something that's specific, like you say, to people in vulnerable areas, but really everyone.
Yeah, more and more is like, it seems like every day, or at least every week, you can look at the news and say, which part of the world is being impacted by climate change this week? And you see that there's always seems to be some disaster going on somewhere, whether it's flooding or heat waves or fires, or it's more and more we're seeing that.
Okay, great. And you said that this book, it's kind of a resiliency plan almost that people can follow. You mentioned people who might be impacted by flooding, but what other kind of specific areas does this book look at?
Right, so it focuses on essentially different areas of your life that you can think about and see how you can make yourself more resilient. So it's in terms of the personal resilience plan, I broke it down into 5 categories in your life where you can think about resilience. And these areas are mental and physical health, skills and knowledge building, community building, financial planning, and then physical preparation. And within each of these 5 categories, there's subcategories. And this is where, in these subcategories, where the reader is urged to think about actions they can do this year, next year, in the short term and long term, that could help them better prepare for climate resilience. Because, like you mentioned, there's different people are in different areas of the world. So climate
Hmm.
change, we're all going to be impacted, but some people differently. So essentially, you need to assess your situation. Where are you? Like, what's your job? Like, it's not just climate change itself, but by, let's say, implementing all the policies to deal with climate change. Maybe if you're working in the oil and gas industry, well, you'll
Hmm.
be impacted because your job at some point will get impacted by the curtailment of fossil fuels. So you have to think about your personal situation, what is likely going to happen or what could happen, and then start thinking about ways that you can implement changes to help deal with those changes.
Hmm. And what kind of scales do you cover? Because what you're saying about potentially people having to move because of flooding, in your own experience moving to a farm, which some might see as quite an extreme action to take, are there kind of smaller things that are suggested in the book as well for people who might not want to go quite that far?
Yeah, basically, I definitely say within the book that that the magnitude of changes I implemented in my life is way
Hmm.
beyond what most people would need to have. But if we look at maybe just the financial aspect, lots of research is showing that over half of the population don't have more than $1,000 in savings, and they can't deal with a situation where they would need to spend more than $1,000. Whereas, if climate change happens and for some, destroys or impacts your home or your property, and you're not able to afford uh, some of these damages, then it could have like this spiraling effect where you can't afford to maybe fix your car because it got impacted by
Hmm.
the high winds or the hail. So then you can't drive because you couldn't fix your car. So then you can't get to work. So there's these if you're not able to handle little things like that, then it can spiral. Similarly, just for jobs, as I said, the climate change will have impacts on people's jobs, on the economy. So whether it's saving for potential economic issues that result from climate change, or it's just taking some courses at the community college so that you're able to maybe pivot to a different job, or maybe there's some opportunities as well. So pivot to something to a job where you can help deal with climate change.
Hmm.
It can be another opportunity. So it's not just risk, but think about climate change in all aspects of your life. It doesn't necessarily need to be major changes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And yeah, looking at this kind of topic of climate change, when we think sometimes about the scale of the problem of climate change, I think it can sometimes feel incredibly overwhelming for some. What do you say to people who are struggling kind of with the immensity of the problem, or see that the societal changes we need to make are just too great? Or how do you yourself deal with those kinds of thoughts?
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting question. Basically, it's completely normal and natural for people to
Hmm.
feel overwhelmed when thinking about the scale and magnitude of climate change. And I think that's why we're seeing this rise of eco-anxiety. It's like
Hmm.
people are feeling depressed, anxious about this future. I've wondered for years how scientists that are working in this field could keep working in it year after year without falling into this despair that that nothing is happening.
Hmm.
Um, but then I started reading about this concept of climate grief. Essentially, when you're learning about and accepting what was happening with climate change, people can actually start to go through this grieving process. So it's like the
Okay.
eco-anxiety, but it's this grieving process, which is quite similar to what someone can go through when they lose someone they love, and similar stages of grief that we've heard about in terms of going through this loss. Um, but the good thing is that it's this process. There's these different stages that you go through as you're learning and accepting what is changing. But at the end of this process, essentially, you can accept. you can accept what the reality is, and that, you
Hmm.
know, yeah, the climate change is happening. It will likely get worse. We need to do a lot of actions, but you've accepted it. And this is basically what I encourage people to do in this book, is to get through this grieving process so that then they can start thinking about and implementing changes in their life that will help them deal with these changes
Hmm.
that are happening with climate change. So you don't need to be powerless. There are things you can do that will help you deal with some of these changes.
Okay, thank you. And kind of on that note is a quite nice way to end, as we're sadly coming to the end of our time. What do you hope readers really will take away from this book?
Yeah, I think there's this narrative that we need to limit global warming to 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius, and that if we don't
Hmm.
do that, that humanity is doomed. I think there's
Yeah.
this narrative is out there, and to me, it's becoming clear to me and to other people that we're not going to achieve those targets. So the fact that, you
Okay.
know, there's these targets and we're doomed, it can be quite depressing. And I think uh, people need to realize that, you know, humans are resilient, and just because we may not achieve those targets doesn't necessarily mean that humanity is doomed. You know, humans made it through the last ice age
Mhm.
with a lot less tools and know-how than we have right now. So we're not doomed. You know, we might be facing some serious challenges, but I think the main thing that I want people to get out of this book is that to accept that climate change is here, that it might get worse in the coming decades,
Hmm.
but that once they get through that, you know, depressing news and accept that, you know, this is the reality that we're going to deal with, that then they could start to implement a plan and think about how they can better cope with this reality themselves and their family and their community. And really, you don't need to be powerless. And I think we've lost a lot of power in the sense that we keep telling people that they need to reduce their impact on climate change. And for all of us that have been doing that
Hmm.
for a decade, and really having no impact really on climate change, because we see record levels of greenhouse gases every year. And it seems that our actions aren't leading to meaningful results when it comes to mitigation. But what I'm encouraging people is that when it comes to, you know, adaptation and resilience, personal steps that you can take today and next year will have an impact on your life within, you know, this context of climate change. So you can have an impact and be
Hmm.
better prepared for climate change.
Okay. So this isn't a book on how to stop climate change, but a book on kind of how to adapt to the consequences that we know will happen because of climate change and the state that we are at now.
Yeah, and it's not really, I'm not saying that we need to give up on the mitigation stage.
Yeah, of course.
We need to double down on that, but
Hmm.
we also at the same time need to think about, okay, we regardless of what we do with mitigation, we will have changes, and we need to start
Yeah.
doing stuff in our personal lives
Hmm.
to deal with those changes.
Yeah. Well, as we discussed earlier, you can already see it in kind of climate catastrophes around the world, wildfires, all those kinds of things. It is already happening. And yeah, I think a book like this about how we can be resilient and deal with what's going on is very timely at the moment.
Yes, for sure.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Remi. Congratulations on the book. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.